Hello YouTube, it's Rowan. I'm back with another video. This time I'm going to be talking about my Mew VMAX deck that I played at the Latin America International Championships, why it's good, and why I think it's even better moving forwards. Now just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to go through the deck list, some of the cards I picked and why they're good, some of the main lines of play, especially Psychic Leaping, because a lot of people don't know how important that is. I'm going to talk about a brief matchup guide. I think I've got 5 matchups I want to talk about, and then I'll touch on resource management and prize cards before I talk about Spiritium, and we'll wrap it up. So here's the deck list. A lot of the counts are very standard. I think all the Pokemon, cards like Battle VIP, Chromamatic, Forest Sealstone, the supporter counts are pretty untouchable. I wouldn't do any edits to them at all. The consistency of the deck is so important. It's what makes this deck so good. The fact that you just set up more often than your opponent, disrupt your opponent, and really punish some decks that have really greedy engines. So I wouldn't touch any of those. Some of the cooler cards, switch counts, hammers, box of disaster, that's what I'm about to get into. So we'll talk about crushing hammers. So the main reason I included this in my deck was that I was struggling to beat some of the dark Pokemon in the format, notably Charizard EX and Roaring Moon EX. And I found that they would just set up Pokemon with energies on them on the bench, and they would have 2 threats, and it didn't matter how I disrupted them, they would just be able to knock me out the next turn. So I thought, well, what if I just put 4 Crushing Hammers in my deck? I can remove the energies, disrupt their hand, and hope that they don't have the energies necessary to attack. So against Roaring Moon, what I'm really looking to be doing with these Crushing Hammers is on the third Roaring Moon, I'm looking to make sure that Roaring Moon doesn't have any energies. I'm looking to spam hammers on it, and then Iono to 1 at the end of the game, and hopefully they whiff an attack. And if they whiff once, you'll usually win. Similarly, against Charizard, I'm looking to KO that first Charizard using a Box of Disaster, and then on that second Charizard, I'm looking to hammer spam Iono to 1 path and hope that they whiff. If you hit 2 hammerheads on the Charizard, they literally cannot attack you, and if you hit 1 hammerheads, they have to draw one of their likely like 3 remaining fire energies or stadium bumps in order to win the game. Additionally, a huge use that I found with Crushing Hammer after I put it into the deck is that against Gardevoir, if they put down any Pokemon that's not a Ralts, and let's say they attach an energy to their Ralts to prepare to Mirage Step on their next turn of the game, you can actually Crushing Hammer away that Psychic energy and boss in that other Pokemon, or maybe it's already in the active, and then your opponent can't Mirage Step, which is so huge. These Gardevoir lists nowadays, especially all the ones that don't play Battle VIP Pass, they're so reliant on Mirage Step. If they're not Mirage Stepping, their setup's going to be pretty mediocre, and you're going to capitalize in the long game with Judges, Paths, and Ionos. It might feel like a short-term play. You might feel like you want to judge them to limit their hand right away, but really just limiting the amount of Kirlias they have throughout the game just means that every time you kill a Kirlia, it's far more effective. And there's plenty of missed uses of Crushing Hammers too. This card's not terrible in really any matchup. It's probably the worst against Champa because usually they discard all their energies. But even against Champa on their first turn, they can bank an energy and you can remove it, making it harder for them to attack on the second turn of the game. And some of these decks is highly effective. Arceus V-Star, Tina V-Star, Fusion Mew, you can discard the fusion energies from playing Maride on. You can deny them from attacking with Raichu. Lugia, you can discard their V-Guard energies or their gift energies to allow yourself to either take KOs or disrupt their hand. This card's really almost never a dead card. Additionally, you can Chromamatic it away if it's really useless. And yeah, I really like this card. Now up next, I'm going to talk about the double box of disaster. Originally, we saw this card included in Mew VMAX decks to help against the Gardevoir matchup, but the double box of disaster is actually not really for Gardevoir. It is great against Gardevoir, but the reason it's in the deck is for the Charizard matchup. Especially, you need to be able to ping that first Charizard for 80 damage so that you can play 2 power tablets, Technoblast for 250, and KO those big Charizards. Otherwise, you can just get ran through by 1 Charizard, which is not a winning strategy. Even with the Crushing Hammers, it just wouldn't be enough. Additionally, it can set up for Psychic Leap plays on EX Pokemon. So one play that I made during LAIC is I was playing against a Roaring Moon player, and they damaged themselves for 80 from a box of disaster, and I actually played 4 power tablets and Psychic Leaped my Mew VMAX into the deck, so that he couldn't take his final 3 prize cards. Now that was a Psychic Leap for 170 damage, which is very hard to pull off. It's not going to come up very often, but it was an incredible play, and without that play, I certainly would have lost the match. And my final point about Box of Disaster is that Mew VMAX is incredible in sudden death. So if you ever come across a situation where it looks like you might be forcing a sudden death and you're kind of unsure, that is a good situation. You want to be in sudden death. If you win the coin flip, you go first, you're taking the turn 2 KO 100% of the time. If you lose the coin flip, you get to judge path, stick a 200 HPV Pokemon in the active, and you're still in a good spot. You know, a deck like Charizard or Gardevoir is way less likely to hit that turn 2 KO than you are, so that's a good spot. Next, I'll talk about the switch counts. A lot of people ask me, I have 2 switch in my deck, why don't I have switch cards? There's no downside. Well, there's a downside. You can't switch out Mew VMAX, and Mew VMAX has free retreat, so this might not seem important, but there's an interaction where if you are starting your turn, you have a Mew VMAX in your active, and you want to burn a switch. You have a switch card, let's say. So you retreat your Mew VMAX, burn the switch card, put up your Mew VMAX again, and you Fusion Strike System, and you draw another switch card. And now you actually can't burn that switch card because you have your Mew VMAX in the active ready to attack, and you can't retreat again. And I had this come up in a few testing games, and I got kind of annoyed by it, so I just said, screw it. I didn't think Lost Box was going to be big. I didn't think Tina Sabling my Genesect was particularly relevant or important, so I just opted for the switches. And then the other consideration is Escape Rope. Now this card I find to be really good in the early turns with the disruption combos. So if you're judge pathing and your opponent has a Celebrations Mew or a Champa in the active, you can actually force it to the bench, which is really strong, and it can prevent them from drawing out of the judge. You want to just give them as few options as possible. So that's where Escape Rope really shines. However, as the games go on, I find that I mostly just want to be attacking the active. I want to be killing the threats. I want to be, killing that Charizard EX. I want to be killing that Roaring Moon, knocking out that Tina, whatever else they may have in the active. I find that usually I don't want to play Escape Rope. I don't want them to send up a Manaphy and I have to kill a Manaphy now. That's crap. So I opted for 2 switches, kept the 1 rope just to have the option on turn 1 of pushing those support Pokemon to the bench. Up next, I'm going to talk about the main lines of play for the deck, what you should be doing while you set up, how you should be Psychic Leaping, and which disruption combos you should be going for. So when you set up on turn 1, something that's very important, and you'll see why later, is that you put down 3 Mew Vs and 3 Genesects. Now, essentially the main reason for this is that you want to be able to use Psychic Leap, and if you limit yourself to 2 Mew Vs at any point in the game, it now means you cannot use Psychic Leap effectively, because if you Psychic Leap, you'll have 1 Mew V, and it can be boss KO'd, at which point you will essentially lose the game, because on your next turn you'll have to pass. Bad situation. 3 Mew Vs, that's what we're really going for. If you're going second, you're going to want to find a judge, and most likely a path. In some matchups, the path is not as important. Maybe against a deck like Lost Tina or even Gardevoir, you don't really need to be pathing them on turn 1. But then in matchups like Champa or Roaring Moon or Mew Mirror, Entei Valiant, I would really be looking to path them. And something else that's crucial with this judge path engine is that you want to be playing judge first, then you want to draw your cards, stack up your hand, make sure that you have a Lost Vacuum, and then play down the path at the end of your turn, and then next turn you're prepped, you can Lost Vacuum the path right away, judge, do it all again, or whatever other play you may be going for. Another great thing to have on turn 1 is a Box of Disaster. This is especially important against decks like Charizard and Roaring Moon, where they have big HP, it's awkward to KO. I would really stress the Box of Disaster turn 1 against Charizard. It's almost mandatory. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about Psychic Leap and the 8 prize game. So this is really the reason this deck is so good. The idea behind it is that most of the time, you're going to lead with a Mew VMAX, and when it dies, your opponent's going to go down to 3 prize cards. So if you send up another Mew VMAX, they can just KO that and win the game, which kind of sucks. You can actually get a free attack in. You can get a free Psychic Leap off. So if you only have 1 VMAX in play, you can use Psychic Leap, put your VMAX in your deck, and now you have a board of all 2 prize Pokemon. And then your opponent has to kill one of them. They go to 1 prize, which didn't help them at all. And then now you get to Iono them to 1, path them, and stick another 300 HP VMAX in the active. Now you can use the Psychic Leap damage, you can combo it with a Power Tablet to kill all the 70 HP or less basics. I frequently knock out Curlias, Frigibaxes, Bidoofs with Psychic Leap, or you can go for chip damage on some of these bigger EX VMAX Pokemon, such as like a Charizard. It comes up sometimes, or you just want to chip it. Maybe you whiff a knockout. You can get your Psychic Leap in. Maybe a Gardevoir EX. Maybe not even a VMAX Pokemon. Maybe it's just a Roaring Moon because you didn't get a box of Disaster off and you're out of tablets. But sometimes just chipping those EX Pokemon is worthwhile, can save you some tablets. And then the other thing I'm going to touch upon briefly is that if your opponent just doesn't kill anything, they don't take out that 2-prize Pokemon, you can just keep using Psychic Leap. You just keep doing it. Just force them to take that 2-prize KO so that you can Iono them to 1. Just keep doing it. And the only time you wouldn't want to Psychic Leap is when you've already lost a 2-prize Pokemon. So say you're going second, and then on your opponent's second turn, they actually knock out a Mew V. Then at that point, you wouldn't want to Psychic Leap because you've already forced them to take 2 prizes. And at that point, you would want to go VMAX, VMAX, and then force that 8-prize game. And this is a common theme across almost every matchup, is where you're trying to force that 8-prize game. And Psychic Leap is just the best way to do it. So just to show you guys an example of when Psychic Leap comes into play, I've got my Peoria top 8 match against Grand Shen pulled up here, and you'll see he's going to Moonlight Shuriken to KO one of my VMAXs, and he's going to set up the other one for a knockout on his next turn. And so if he was able to kill another VMAX, he would actually be able to make a 6-2 comeback and win the game. But I'm going to stop this by using Psychic Leap to knock out his Frigibax on the bench, put my Mew VMAX into the deck, and prevent Grant from drawing 3 prize cards on his next turn. So if I just skip forward here a little bit through my turn, I do some actions, I play a Power Tablet, bring in the Frigibax, and I'll shuffle in my Mew VMAX. Here's the board of all 2 prizers. This is exactly what it should look like. And Grant will play out his meaningless turn, and I'll win the game on the next turn. All right, up next, I'm going to talk about the frequently used disruption combos, how you want to be using these, when you want to be using these. First of all, we're going to talk about Judge Path. This is like the core strategy of the deck. You really want to be getting this off as soon as possible. Disrupt your opponent from either attaching a bunch of energies or evolving other Pokemon. So when you go second, you want to be doing this on your first turn of the game. And when you go first, you want to be doing it on your second turn of the game and comboing it with an attack almost all the time. Sometimes you want to be playing Boss's Orders, but usually you want to be going for that Judge Path play. And then when your VMAX dies, you can Judge Path them again. You can continue to Judge Path them while you're comboing in your Psychic Leaps. And then once they've taken 5 of their 8 prize cards, you're going to hit them with the Iono to 1 Path and put a VMAX in the active. And usually in the hammer spam matchups, Roaring Moon, Charizard, you want to be doing this when they're on 1 prize card. You want to make sure that your hammers are most effective, use them most effectively with that Iono to 1, and really combo all your disruption together there at the end in a last push to buy yourself 1 or even more turns sometimes against decks like Charizard. You can buy like 3 turns off of just a late game hammer spam Iono path. All right, I'm gonna go into the matchup guide now. I've got, I think, about 5 decks to talk about. A lot of these lines are going to be very similar. You'll notice some trends. So I'm not going to talk about every matchup in the format. I think most people will be able to pick up upon the ideas that I'm presenting and apply those to other decks. So first off, I'm going to talk about the Gardevoir matchup. Now, this is one of the closest matchups. I do think it's slightly favored. We have a lot of disruption. Our Pokemon are difficult to KO, and we have the double box of Disaster. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if they mess up, if they put down a Pokemon that's not a Ralt, we're going to be looking to boss that on turn 1 and Crushing Hammer away the energy that they likely put on the Ralts. Crushing Hammers don't have a lot of uses in this matchup, so it's okay to just chuck them all away on turn 1, and then even throughout the game, if you just see energies on the board, even if you're going to knock them out anyways, just throw the hammers away. They're not super impactful, and they can clog your hands sometimes. So yeah, not looking for the hammers. What we are looking to conserve in this matchup is Power Tablets. Now, 3 Power Tablets can kill a Gardevoir EX with 2 Psychic Embraces, which isn't significant because sometimes at the end of the game, they'll be running out of attackers and they're just going to start punching you with Gardevoir EX. So conserving your tablets is really important to be able to punish this play. Furthermore, these tablets are important to be able to Psychic Leap Pokemon. We're going to be forcing an 8 prize card game in this matchup, and being able to take KOs while we're Psychic Leaping is really important. And the best thing to do is to Psychic Leap KO Kirlias. Now, usually I don't want to lead with the Psychic Leap plan because at the start of the game, it's really hard for them to kill the Mew VMAX. So I'll usually go in with my Mew VMAX, and depending on how many energy cards are in their discard pile, I'll just keep punching with the Mew VMAX. I won't Psychic Leap. I'll let them kill that first VMAX, and then once they have like the God set up, I'll start going for those Psychic Leap plays, and then the Iono to one path will hopefully let my second Mew VMAX stick for a turn. Up next, we got the Charizard matchup. Now, this matchup's pretty linear. You're doing the same thing. You're just judge pathing them, hoping that they whiff at least one time. So we have a couple chances to brick them. So we're going to go for the turn 1 judge path if we go second, or turn 2 if we went first. Either way, the position is fairly similar. You're going to get that judge path off. You're going to have a box of disaster on your active. Now, if you went first, you're going to get to take a knockout. If you went second, you're obviously just going to have to pass because you can't evolve. But if they draw out of this first judge, they're going to knock you out. They're going to ping themselves with the box of disaster. Now, if they draw the nuts and they remove your path and your box of disaster and they rare candy into a Charizard, at that point, it's going to get pretty messy. We're going to have to hope to flip some hammerheads and, I don't know, path them. That's really not ideal. Hopefully, we're hoping they hit the box. And so once they hit into the box, they're going to take 80, and we're going to judge path, I don't know, path. Either one works. Depending on what resources you have available. If you prized your Pal Pad, you should really look to conserve your Iono in that spot. If you didn't, you can play your Iono. And you're going to double tablet, Technoblast, knock out that Charizard, and force them to have another one right away. Now, let's talk about the line where you went second. Okay, so you went second, you didn't attack, you had your box, they knocked out your Mew V. And then now we return KO'd them, and they're going to draw out of it again. They're going to draw the nuts twice because sometimes your opponent's just the best and it happens. From here, they're going to knock you out. They're going to go to one prize, and now we spring the trap. We Iono them to one, path to the peak, hammer spam on their second Charizard, and just punch it for 190. And you hope they whiff. If they hit the nuts 3 times on that line, you're just going to lose. You can't do anything about it. Can't be salty because we are playing a deck that is trying to cheese them. It is very effective. It works a lot of the time, but occasionally your opponent's going to draw the nuts 3 times. You're going to feel like you're the most unlucky person ever, but sometimes it happens, so we can't complain. Up next, the Maride matchup. This one's super straightforward. All you got to do is make sure you don't get bricked by path, and you're going to destroy them. This is one of the few matchups where you actually aren't looking to use Psychic Leap. You just don't need to. You can. It's probably not terrible if they punch you for 220. You can Psychic Leap it away, buy yourself a turn. But generally, I just want to set up as many VMAXs as possible. You can retreat to the next one and just Technoblast, 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 kill 3 2-prize Pokemon, and win the game. Up next, the Tina matchup. This one is a little bit intricate because their ability to Roxanne Pathos is fairly concerning. Additionally, they have Star Requiem, which can put pressure on a VMAX, and they have Sableye as well to kind of make things awkward for us. They can kind of chip all of our VMAXs and set them up. So this matchup, it is fairly important to use Psychic Leap. So if they, once they've Star Requiemed a Mew VMAX, they cannot one-shot a Mew VMAX anymore, which is really important. So if you ever have a Mew VMAX and it's chip damaged from Sableye or Cram or whatever, we're going to be looking to Psychic Leap that away, maybe force them to loss impact a Mew V. That's the dream. They put 2 energies in the loss zone, and those 2 prize cards don't even really help them. So furthermore, conserving Forest Sealstone is really important. Basically, as long as you have your Forest Sealstone up, you can't lose. So once you flip that V-Star marker, it does get a little sketchy because you can lose to Roxanne Path, but while you have the Sealstone up, you can always go get a Lost Vacuum and then play a turn, Psychic Leap, set up a new VMAX, whatever you need to do, boss's orders. Additionally, Judge is very effective in this matchup. Your opponent's going to be looking to build their hand. Every time they play a Colress, they see a bunch of cards, they pick all the good ones. Abyss Seeking, they pick all the good ones, and they're constantly picking good cards. So even if your Lost Tina opponent has a relatively small hand, you can usually infer when their cards are strong. Maybe they do a flower selecting, they put a Colress in the Lost Zone. Well, oh my gosh, their other card must be better than a Colress. So in certain situations, there's only one card that could be better than a Colress, and you want to be judging when you see those strong Lost Zones. Up next, we got the Champa matchup. Now, I actually think this matchup is very favorable. This deck already struggles to set up turn 2 Baxcalibur sometimes, so when you're judge pathing them aggressively, it's even worse for them. And most of the time, my opponents don't even get that turn 2 backs. Now, if they do, you still have counterplay. You still get to disrupt them a few more times. The name of the game with our deck is usually just buy one turn, judge path. Okay, they knocked me out. Judge path again. Oh my gosh, they got it again. I don't know to one path. Oh, they whiffed. Let's go. I win. So against this matchup, Psychic Leap also gets huge value. I'm going to be looking to target down the Bidoofs in this matchup. You might think that you want to target the Baxcalibur because it's a stage 2 Pokemon, but it's actually easier to set up a Baxcalibur when you have the Bibarel than it is to set up a Bibarel when you have the Baxcalibur, especially when they're also being pressured to draw energies to hit knockouts. Killing the Bibarel is really, it's the lifeline of their deck. If you can knock their Bibarel out, you're going to win. Some of my opponents at LAIC didn't even set up a Bibarel, and I just judge path, path them into oblivion. So yeah, target the Bibarels if you can. I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the additional good matchups, Iron Hands, Roaring Moon, and Entei. When I talk about Iron Hands, I'm talking about like a Maridon-based deck. We saw a Neil made top 16. I think he was 13th place with his 18 energy Iron Hands deck. That's the idea I'm really thinking of. I think that deck's really good. And as our format shifts towards a Gardevoir heavy format, decks like 18 energy Iron Hands Turbo and Entei Valiant are going to be really good at keeping Gardevoir in its place. And we actually trounce on these decks because they don't really have a good way to deal with a Mew VMAX. They don't really like to be judge path. They really just have no counterplay. Now, these are the kinds of decks that I would not be surprised to see a Spiritomb come into because they know their matchup's bad and they can make it much better with a Tomb. And then additionally, Roaring Moon. I think this matchup's really, really good. I played against 2 of them at LAIC. I had no troubles beating either of them. They really struggle. Sometimes they even whiff the second Roaring Moon when you apply a lot of pressure. If they hit it every turn, you will lose, but they won't hit it every turn. On their last Roaring Moon, Iono to 1, Path to the Peak, Crushing Hammer, Crushing Hammer, Crushing Hammer, Crushing Hammer, set their Roaring Moon to 1 or 0 energies, and they'll almost never have that final knockout. Now I'm just going to briefly talk about resource management, some of the cards that you should be conserving in different matchups and how I think about that. So sometimes it's hard to think about when you can discard resources in favor of drawing more cards because you can be over conservative and you can be under conservative with this deck, and it's really important to find that sweet spot. So to find that sweet spot, I try to plan out my turns as far as I can. I think about what am I going to KO, what am I going to need to use to disrupt, what supporters am I going to need, how many energy cards do I have prized, stuff like that. So here's just a brief table before I get into that deeper about what cards I'm looking to conserve in what matchups. So against Gardevoir, I'm looking to conserve as many tablets as possible. I want to be able to pressure Gardevoir EX. I want to be able to Psychic Leap on Curlias, and also my path to the peaks. They have only 3. They usually have 4 stadium bumps now, actually. So you want to be making sure that you can path as many times as possible. Every time you path, they use a stadium bump. They have less in their deck, and it's less likely that they'll be able to beat the next path. Against Charizard, you need 2 tablets to kill the first Charizard with the Box of Disaster double tablet play. And then generally you don't actually need more tablets. So that's one where a matchup where I'm actually okay with pitching my tablets as long as I have access to my Boxes of Disaster. And again, 3 path to the peak. They run out of stadium bumps. Same idea as Gardevoir. Against Tina, I'm just looking to conserve my path bumps and my power tablets so I can knock out Tinas. I don't play Choice Belt, so it sometimes can get awkward to kill those Tinas, and then also to Psychic Leap. Against Champa, I'm really looking to conserve my bosses because in the middle of the game, they'll always have a Champa in the active, and you want to get Psychic Leap value, so you got to boss something in. So I'm looking at my bosses, making sure I have access to them in order to not only boss up those small Pokemon, but then on the following turns to boss back in those 2 prize Pokemon and knock them out. So, some general resource management tips. I always have an offensive plan and a defensive plan when I play this deck. So, on the offensive side, I'm thinking about what Pokemon I'm going to KO, how often I need to be playing bosses orders, how many tablets it requires for me to do this. So, just be really intentional with what you're doing in the game. Think, okay, this turn I want to kill their Curlia. The next turn, I want to kill their Gardevoir EX or whatever. Just think it out. Think about what you want to do, because then when you plan out ahead of time, then you can effectively manage your resources better in order to not make mistakes and maximize how many cards you can draw. You know, if you're planning, say you're playing against Gardevoir, your plan's just to kill like 3 1-prize Pokemon in a row. Well, now you can just kind of pitch your tablets away, draw through the rest of your deck, and then you're less likely to whiff on whatever other cards you need. Along with this offensive plan, you should be thinking of how you're going to incorporate Psychic Leap. If you're Psychic Leaping on a basic Pokemon, you're going to need a tablet for that. So if you're going to need to Psychic Leap like a Frigibax, say, you want to make sure you still have enough tablets after that to knock out those Champows. So that's just another thing to think about there. And on the defensive plan, I'm thinking about the disruption combos. What do I want to disrupt my opponent? So in some matchups, Path to the Peak, you want to be keeping them, like against Gardevoir or Charizard. You need those paths. Against a deck like Maride, I don't really care. I'll chuck my Path to the Peaks in the discard all day. Furthermore, how many judges do you need? Is your Iono in your deck? Is your Pal Pad in the deck? Those are both one-ofs. Sometimes they're prized. Sometimes you have to discard it to get out of an awkward hand. So really thinking about if you have access to those late game disruption combos throughout the game is very important. So you don't get to that last turn and not have your Iono. Also, Path Outs is a good defensive plan. Idea is like against decks like Tina or Maridon, you want to be conserving your path bumps. So in some matchups, I'll throw my vacuums to the wind. You know, I'll put down a path, vacuum my path just to thin cards from my hand. A deck against a deck like Tina or Maridon, I'll be way less inclined to do so, because you need to have your deck saturated with path bumps in case you get judged, Iono'd, Rock Sand, whatever disruption you're getting hit by. If you can draw a vacuum off of that, you're set. So conserving those in some matchups as well is something to look out for. Now I'm going to talk about prize cards. So if you're not prize checking, you should really be prize checking. It's really important, especially with this deck. You want to be able to make informed decisions. This ties into the resources idea really well. When you prize a power tablet, you need to know that you're down that tablet, so you don't go for that final KO and realize, oh my gosh, I don't even have enough damage, and have to adapt on the fly. You want to be planning ahead. You don't want to freak out when you realize it's prize. So on my initial prize check, I'm checking Mew VMAXs, because if you prize 2 Mew VMAXs, you need to adapt. You need to conserve your 1 VMAX. This can mean Psychic Leaping on turn 1, trying to sack Mew Vs over your Mew VMAX. It can involve killing 2 prizers when otherwise you wouldn't, trying to draw prizes, because if your 1 Mew VMAX dies, you cannot attack and you instantly lose the game. Hisuian Heavy Ball targets. This is really important, because if you fusion Strike System into a Cramomatic and a Hisuian Heavy Ball, you need to know if you can play the Heavy Ball and get a Pokemon, or you should Cramomatic that Heavy Ball away. That's one I've been punished by before, so definitely check that. Even at League Cups, that one, please check that one. Power tablets, of course, disruption combo pieces, especially Path to the Peaks. You know, if I prize a few Path to the Peaks, sometimes I won't put down path on my initial judges. I'll save my path for that final Iono path combo at the end, because that's the one that's most likely to stick and the one that's most important to have a path for. And then the last one is switch cards and energy. This one's a bit more advanced. Most of my opponents don't even pick up on this, but when I'm playing, I always make sure that I have enough energy cards and switch cards left, so that if my opponent just starts spamming bosses orders, I won't lose the game to deck out, because our deck is very fragile in that manner. We only have 4 energies and 3 switch cards, and our Genesects cannot attack. So especially as you're turboing away your deck, you're drawing a bunch of cards, you're ultra balling away resources, you want to be able to keep an eye on this. And in order to keep an eye on it properly, you need to know how many of them are prized. All right, that's all we got from you, VMAX.